I'm hearing a whole bunch of criticism aimed in my direction because of stuff I supposedly said, in favor of President Donald Trump. I could tell y'all to kiss my ass because that's how I really feel, but I'll do you one better. I'll explain myself even before the governor of Maryland, Wes Moore, comes on to say what he has to say about President Trump. It's the Stephen A. Smith Show in the house. Let's roll. What's up, everybody? Welcome to this latest edition of the Stephen A. Smith Show, coming at you as I love to do over the digital airwaves of YouTube. The show now has eclipsed 1.27 million subscribers and followers. Can't thank y'all for the love and support enough. Keep it coming, and I'm going to keep on coming. By the way, as a reminder, in the future, not only will it, starting September 2nd, will I be on SiriusXM Mad Dog Sports Radio every weekday from 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, re-airing from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But every Monday, my show will be airing on YouTube as well. So you can make sure to click it right here. Plus, I got a political show starting September 17th on POTUS, SiriusXM Channel 124, debuting September 17th from 6 to 8 p.m. And by the way, that show will re-air on YouTube the very next morning as well. So stay tuned. Keep it locked in. The content's going to keep coming to this channel along with everywhere else. You know, I like ubiquity. I like being ubiquitous. What can I tell you? That's how it goes. I got a lot of stuff to get into. Obviously, the world has seen the back and forth between the president of the United States, Donald Trump, and of course, the governor of Maryland, Mr. Wes Moore, only the third African-American to be a governor in this nation's history. They've been clapping back at one another because of Trump's positions on using the National Guard to come into certain cities like Los Angeles, like D.C., alluding just recently to probably sending the National Guard to Baltimore, Maryland. Well, the governor of Maryland has something to say about that, along with some few other choice words about the president. So you'll hear that yourself when the governor comes on with yours truly in just a few minutes. But before he did, I felt compelled to open the show with my own monologue rather than going straight to the governor to speak about a few things that are on my mind and have been on my mind over the last few days, because certain things have just raked my nerves. And that's where I wanted to start today, with criticism I've been receiving about anything I've had to say about President Trump that leans remotely towards positivity. Let me get this out the way. I want to emphasize to the point that I'm not interested in making any enemies, but I don't give a shit about making friends. I have enough friends. I have enough loved ones. I have enough family members, okay? I am a grown-ass man who's an American citizen, who's a conscientious voter, or a conscientious observer, and I'm a voter. And when I see stuff that's going on, I'm going to say it. I don't care about party affiliations. Although I hear where Charlamagne the God was coming from in terms of none of us are really an independent because we live in a binary system that forces us to choose one side or another. I'm talking about independence as a thinker, which I know Charlamagne the God is, by the way. I'm talking about not letting party affiliation dictate how the hell I'm going to feel or what I'm going to express. That's me. That has been me. That is going to stay me. And I'm watching a whole bunch of stuff with people going off because some clip was edited and put out there with salacious headlines to draw y'all in. And all of a sudden, I could be talking for 25, 30 minutes, and all y'all heard was 30 seconds. And suddenly, you're going to be able to define what the hell I'm thinking. It's BS. Open your minds. Stop being suckers. Stop walking around acting like somebody's soundbite defines them. It doesn't. I just saw something on social media the other day. Somebody's talking about Stephen A. clapped back or Stephen A. went at Vanessa Bryant, the wife and the widow of Kobe Bryant, God rest his soul, who I've never uttered a negative syllable about. It was made up. I never said it. Then I saw some other video where people are piecing together something that I said on Sports Center 11 years ago with something that I said on First Take 5 years ago with something that I may have said last week, and you're splicing it together and acting like it's one for. I mean, we're living in the world of AI, ladies and gentlemen. People are lying all the time. But to get specifically to Trump, I had the temerity, the unmitigated gall to say, hey, everything he's not doing is bad. Everything he's doing is not bad, rather. Closing the borders was a good thing. Only because Biden opened them. The tariff wars, I'm not sure that's good for the American citizen. But when the S&P 500 just a couple of weeks ago is reported to be up 10%, and inflation hasn't ravaged our country, and a recession hasn't definitively kicked in, and $15 trillion in pledges doesn't mean it's going to happen, but $15 trillion in pledges have been made to the manufacturing and semiconductor industry and beyond to create jobs in America. If that comes out to fruition, that's not something we can complain about. For me to point out these things about President Trump that, dare I say, are somewhat positive, like when I alluded to, if it is true that indeed he has assisted in ending 7 wars. And we know that's embellishment. It's not true. But if it ends up happening, not just ceasefires, but actually end to wars in Russia versus Ukraine, in Hamas and Israel, in the Congo and Rwanda and all of this other stuff. If indeed that happens, we're not going to be able to throw shade on him if that happens. Because we all know he wants the Nobel Peace Prize. And some people are out there saying, how could you even think about him? Who the hell said I'm thinking about it? I'm telling you what they're saying. They're saying this about him. Me pointing these things out got people calling me everything but a child of God. I could say, y'all. I ain't going to say the word. I could have said it because you deserve it. But I won't. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't cover the White House. I don't cover, quote unquote, cover politics. I'm a conscientious observer. I read, I pay attention, I try to learn about the issues to some degree. But you're not, no matter what you learn, there's going to always be two sides. One denying it, one confirming it, vice versa. Everybody trying to malign the other. And somewhere in there lies the truth. All I'm saying is if certain things pan out, there's nothing wrong with being complimentary as a president. Well, Stephen A., how the hell could you say that? I mean, damn, you a black man. Don't you see what he's doing? Yes, I do see. I don't see anybody that looks like me in his cabinet, which is always something that we should be sensitive about. Damn, ever heard of diversity, President Trump? Ain't a black person anywhere qualified to work for you on a high level? You can pluck dudes off of Fox News to be your defense secretary? But you can't find a black person that deserves elevation within your administration? Marco Rubio, former senator, who's our Secretary of State. Damn, he's also, although qualified, hell, he's your Chief National Security Advisor. You talked about weaponization of the FBI and the CIA. What the hell? Not the FBI, CIA, the DOJ and the FBI. What you doing now? You think I ain't know this? And then as a black person, don't get me started. What is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different executive orders detrimentally affecting black history? What's disseminated? What folks are being educated about? Including with the Smithsonian just trying to erase or eradicate black history at every turn? When the hell you gonna come out with it and say, hey, I don't want you having civil rights? You think I don't know this? But that doesn't give us the license to turn around and notice when something is beneficial to us, even if that wasn't the intent. If the economy is better than expected, that benefits us. If the job market is decent, that benefits us. If the tariffs come to fruition and is everything and ends up being everything he says, that will benefit us. I'm supposed to ignore that? I'm supposed to ignore that in the eyes of other officials locally and globally that some people might make a call for him to win the Nobel Peace Prize, know that he wants it. Who's to say that they're not doing it because they want to ingratiate themselves with him because we know how egotistical he is and he'll applaud that and reward them for it. And that's what their real agenda is. We don't know. But when stuff is going on, you got to call it like we see it. And if there are positive things that he's doing, I'm going to say so. That doesn't mean I feel positive about him. That doesn't think I think he gives a damn about us. But if your actions lead to something that will benefit our community, so be it. We ain't having Thanksgiving dinner with the man and exchanging Christmas gifts, y'all. He's the president of the United States. And policies that he puts forth and strives to implement affect us. And the reality is that it cannot be ignored. And if we try to ignore it, it's to our detriment because we're acting like we're immune to stuff that we're not immune to. And you got to remember that. At some point in time, that is what it comes down to. And somewhere along the way, you're going to have to convince yourself of that, or you're just going to have to suck it up and deal with it. I'm looking at Trump, and again, I don't like some of the stuff that I'm seeing. I'm just looking at a bunch of stuff here. And I see the overreach. Let me be very, very clear about that. I never thought that the National Guard should be in LA. I don't think the National Guard should be in Baltimore. I wish I could tell y'all definitively I feel that way about Chicago. I do not. Those folks have been clamoring for federal assistance for years. Every time we hear about murders, every time we hear about violence, we hear about Chicago. Not to say that absolves St. Louis and other cities from some of the things that ail them. But Chicago has been bad for a long time. And when you talk about the National Guard, you're talking about part of their obligations is to address civil unrest. Which brings me to another point that nobody ever brings up that I bring up, and God forbid that I bring this up because, oh my God, it's a problem. When Gavin Newsom went off, I had no problem with Gavin Newsom trolling Donald Trump. I thought that was a brilliant strategy on his part, and I think it's something he should continue to do. Because you got to fight fire with fire. But there's a flip side to all of this. Do y'all understand that the word civil unrest is a category that the National Guard is authorized to address when it is something that is pervasive in any part of America? Understand that when Trump says something, if your reaction is to engage in violence and protest, you're setting cars afire, Molotov cocktails in the buildings and stuff like that. You're assaulting law enforcement officials and stuff like that. You do understand that that gives justification for the participation of the National Guard. In other words, when Trump opens his mouth with some of the salacious stuff that he spews, trying to provoke folks, do you understand that you're playing right into his hands? When you fall for the okie doke and you end up reacting the way that you do, it gives him justification to do exactly what he said he wanted to do. You can't fall for that, which some Los Angeles did in protesting ISIS presence there, along with the National Guard and the Marines. Can't do it. When you do that, you play right into his hands. You want to make noise about the National Guard being in D.C., it's falling on deaf ears. Do you know why? Because D.C. is not a state. The federal government runs D.C., and Trump is over the federal government. He can do what he wants in D.C. You can bloviate all you want till the cows come home. He is perfectly within his jurisdiction to do what he's doing in D.C., according to my statistics, to my data. But the flip side to it, that ain't the case in Maryland. That might not be the case in Chicago. One could have argued had they not thrown, set cars on fire and all of this other stuff, it wouldn't have been justified in L.A. In the end, you got to pay attention. And that's what I'm striving to do. Calling it like I see it along the way. For those of you who think that I don't know that I don't have my stats when it comes to his executive orders are 14151, ending radical and wasteful government DEI programs and prefacing. We know what he was doing that for. Executive Order 14173, January 21st, a day after his inauguration. The first one was the day before. Ending illegal discrimination and restoring merit-based opportunity. All right. Executive Order 14148, initial recessions of harmful executive orders and actions. This is when he revoked dozens of Biden-era orders, including those concerning racial equality, racial equity, and environmental justice, and eliminated the National Law Enforcement Accountability Database, which tracked police misconduct. That was Executive Order 14148 on January 20th. Okay? All of that was in his first 2 days in office. There's another one. The Smithsonian Executive Order, March 27, 2025, directed the removal of divisive narratives and improper ideology from Smithsonian museums, including the National Museum of African American History and Culture under the supervision of VP J.D. Vance. It also signaled intentions to restore Confederate monuments. Remember that? That's Smithsonian Executive Order, March 27th, 2025. And it's not an accident. It doesn't escape me that the vice president has been relatively quiet, other than him being on TV going after Zelensky when he came to the Oval Office in his fatigues months ago. But you associated with this, where you're talking about signaling intentions to restore Confederate monuments. That's what Vice President J.D. Vance is overseeing, really. Last but not least, Trump administrations initiated a sweeping purge across federal agencies, including NASA, NSA, the Department of Defense, the Department of Education, targeting DEI-related staff, scrubbing mentions of Black history and minority achievements from government websites, and canceling civil rights grants and programs. You think I haven't noticed that? You think I don't notice that he's rolling back civil rights in the eyes of so many of us? Of course you mention that. You mention it all because it gives you a picture of what he's intending to do. There are things that we indirectly benefit from as it pertains to some of his policies with regards to the economy, at least in the eyes of some people. But there are other things that are not indirect. They're very direct. And it could be an assault against the African American community in our eyes. Of course you mention it. Of course you don't forget it. But does it mean that you ignore the positives? You know why you don't do that? Because it makes you just like you accused them of being. And isn't that what got the Dems in trouble to begin with? Whether you engaged in lawfare, criminalizing the man, going after him, I don't care about what you said he did. When you load the courts with liberal officials, when you got liberal prosecutors going after him, when you impeached him not once but twice, but it wasn't going to fly through, it wasn't going to hold the mustard, because at the end of the day, the Democrats was going to unanimously vote against him, and you're going to have the GOP unanimously voting in favor of him. All it does is serve to divide us and gives an excuse for him to play victim and say, see how they are, they're despicable human beings, they're just out to get me, attach no credibility to what they're saying. It's what he's done. And he's been successful as it. And how do we know that? Because he's the president of the United States. After being convicted of 34 felony counts, after being impeached twice, he still regained the presidency. At some point in time, you're going to have to be neutral and objective and fair-minded enough to point out when he does something positive, while never forgetting all the negative he might be doing in our eyes. That is what I try to do. If y'all can't accept it, bump it. Go watch somebody else. I'm going to strive to tell the truth. Period. And I'm not changing. You cancel that dream. When the man does something right, I'm going to say so. When he does something wrong, I'm going to say so. And that goes for all of them. All of them. That's the way it has been on the Stephen A. Smith Show, and that's the way it's going to stay. Get used to it, y'all. Get used to it. Coming up next, he is the governor of the great state of Maryland, who has found himself in a very awkward position because he's been going toe-to-toe up against the President of the United States of America. They're not seeing eye to eye on a few things, and he's been outspoken about this. Is this a sign of things to come? We're about to find out when we talk to the governor of Maryland, Mr. Wes Moore, about Donald Trump. Up next. Stick around. You're watching The Stephen A. Smith Show. Back with more in a minute. As promised, our next guest is the governor of the great state of Maryland, the one and only Wes Moore is with me right now. What's up, Governor? How are you, sir? How's everything?
I'm great, sir. It's good to be with you. Good to be with you.
Well, first of all, it's always good to be with you. I'm looking forward to, let the audience know right now, I'm going to be in Baltimore for that Monday night game, week 3 of this NFL season. I see you with your Ravens on. I see it. I see it. We will definitely get into all of that. Make no mistake about it. We got a lot to talk about, but you're not leaving today without talking about your Ravens, because damn it, if they don't win the Super Bowl this year, you ain't going to hear the end of it from me. You ain't going to hear the end of it from me.
They're looking scary good.
They are, but with those expectations, they got to live up to it. We'll talk about that in just a few minutes, but on a much more serious matter, Governor, I wanted to have you on. And before we even get into the conversation about you and the president, upon his declaration to send the National Guard to the nation's capital, one of the things that you wrote, you initially said, quote, last week, you responded to my concerns about the deployment of National Guard personnel for municipal policing in Washington, D.C. by insulting me personally from the Oval Office. Homicides in Maryland are down statewide by 20% since my inauguration 2.5 years ago. In the first 6 months of 2025, the Baltimore Police Department continued to see double-digit reductions in gun violence, including a 22% decrease in homicides and a 19% decrease in non-fatal shootings from the year before. I would like to formally invite you, talking to the president, to attend our next public safety walk in September at a date of your choosing. Needless to say, the president came back and he writes, quote, Governor Wes Moore of Maryland has asked in a rather nasty and provocative tone that I walk the streets of Maryland with him. I assume he is talking about out-of-control, crime-ridden Baltimore. As president, I would much prefer that he clean up this crime disaster before I go there for a quote-unquote walk. Wes Moore's record on crime is a very bad one, unless he fudges his figures in crime, like many of the other blue states are doing. But if Wes Moore needs help, like Gavin Newsom did in L.A., I will send in the troops, which is being done in nearby D.C., and quickly clean up the crime. That's about all I need to read right now. The president has directly responded to you. I wanted to give you the floor to directly respond to him yet again, as you have on several occasions over the last few days.
Well, my invitation to the president was sincere, because my focus on making our streets safe is sincere. And it's one of the reasons why I ran for governor in the first place, was before I became the governor. In 2022, the year before I became the governor, that we saw how Baltimore was averaging almost a homicide a day. That for the 8 years before I became the governor, under my predecessor, that we saw the homicide rate in the state of Maryland nearly doubled. The non-fatal shooting rate did double. That amongst the first months that I was governor, that Baltimore had the largest mass shooting in Baltimore's history, where dozens of people were shot on a July 4th party, and most of them were children. And I remember going and visiting a hospital, shock trauma, and visiting a young man who just finished surgery, and watching a young man who literally had one of his testicles shot off, talking to me about how he might never be a father. And I said in that moment, I refuse to keep doing this and not doing everything in my power to make sure that we are creating safer streets and safer communities. That since I've been the governor, we've made the largest investments in local law enforcement in the history of the state of Maryland, getting more boots on the ground. that we've made record investments in technology and predictive analytics, and saying if someone commits a violent crime with a firearm, I want them in handcuffs in 24 hours. Saying that we're going to make historic investments and working with the mayor, working with the state's attorney, making Maryland one of the only states that actually helps to fund the U.S. attorney out of balance sheet to turn some of these crimes into federal gun crimes. And the results have been not just incredibly encouraging, but they've been lasting. We're now and again, I'm not talking week on week. I'm talking year on year. What are the year on year numbers? Homicide statewide down 24% in the state of Maryland. In Baltimore City down 30%. Non-fatal shootings statewide down 24%. Non-fatals in Baltimore down 17%. That we're watching, juvenile homicides down statewide 37%, in Baltimore City down 81%. These are numbers. This is data. And so my invitation for the president to come actually take this seriously was sincere, because the idea that you were going to address this problem by putting the National Guard in the streets is not a sincere response. That's performative.
Why is it not a sincere response?
Because it doesn't work. It's not sustainable. You can't do that. We are spending well over $1 million a day to have the National Guard in Washington, D.C. right now. And do you know what assignments they have? They're picking up trash. They're raking mulch. They're not doing policing activities. And do you know why I know that, Stephen A? Because they're not trained to do it. That's not the training of the members of the National Guard. And I know that because I was one of these soldiers that wore the uniform. I was one of these people who actually deployed overseas and led soldiers in combat. The members of the United States military are trained to fight and win our nation's wars. The members of the National Guard, and the reason I know this is because I am the commander-in-chief of the Maryland National Guard, not the president. They are trained to be able to respond in emergency situations, in situations where we have traumatic situations happening within our individual jurisdictions, and they are then mobilized by the commander-in-chief of the National Guard, which in the state of Maryland is me. I know what they are trained on. And so the fact that we have these National Guard who are being called up to Washington, D.C., it is not sustainable. It is in no way scalable. You're not going to do that in every major American city in America.
Of course.
It's not constitutional because it is a violation of the 10th Amendment to the Constitution. And even if you want to say, well, how the president could actually alter their structure, or the president could actually, alter how they look at the different variables that they'll look at in terms of who actually operates them and calls them. Even if you look at the Insurrection Act, it's still a violation of Article 2 and Article 4 of the Insurrection Act. And so I go back to the president and I say, what are we talking about? It is so disrespectful to the members of the National Guard. These are citizen soldiers who have families, many of them who have other jobs, and are now being pulled away from their families, pulled away from their other jobs, so they can do theatrics. So they can actually do things that actually are not going to impact public safety in these areas. Because if the president were serious about it, I can give a whole list of things that he could be investing in that's actually making our community safe.
Well, obviously, the Democrats will say one thing, the GOP will say another. But if you're somebody that's removed from both sides of the aisle and you're just looking at this objectively, I would tell you that in Maryland, like Chicago, and to a lesser degree in Los Angeles, those are states, obviously, you know what, you're the commander-in-chief of that state, of the state of Maryland. Make no mistake about that. But in D.C., they say that the National Guard reports to Trump. So he's perfectly within his right to do what he's doing in D.C. when he tries to venture beyond those parameters, beyond those lines, to a state like Maryland or others. That's where he's really crossing the line. Do you acknowledge that part?
Well, I do acknowledge that the legal justifications of Washington, D.C. are different than the state of Maryland, because they are not a state, which is a whole nother issue. They should be a state. But you are absolutely right that there are different legal guidelines for Washington, D.C. than there are for the state of Maryland. But then you know what? If that is the case also, then keep Baltimore out of your mouth. Because if you want to have a conversation about what we can do to address Baltimore, we can have an honest conversation and not turn it into something that ends up theatrical.
But here's the deal, Governor. You're right, because you are the governor of Maryland and you have every right to push back the way that you're doing. I have no issue with that. The issue, however, would be Gavin Newsom is the governor in California. He sent the National Guard there. He certainly did that with about 4,000 troops, about 700 members of the United States Marines who are trained to kill. They ain't trained to police, but he sent them there anyway, obviously much to the chagrin of Governor Newsom, of Mayor Bass and others. If he could do it in Los Angeles, isn't it plausible to surmise that he could do it in Baltimore, even if you're against it?
I've been very clear to the President of the United States. I have taken a few oaths. I have taken an oath when I was a soldier, and that was to defend this country against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I would follow the Constitution of the United States of America. I had taken an oath when I became the 63rd governor of the state of Maryland, and also an oath when I became the commander-in-chief of the Maryland National Guard. And I was very clear when I signed an oath as a soldier that we have an obligation to follow all lawful orders. Lawful orders. Mm-hmm. And if the President of the United States is not following the law, if the President of the United States is violating the law, specifically things like the Constitution, specifically things like if you want to talk about the Insurrection Act, and you're talking about Articles 2, Sections 2 and 3 of the Insurrection Act, and Article 4, Section 4 of the Insurrection Act, which talks specifically about what does it take for a state to be able to say our resources have been overwhelmed and we are inviting the federal government to come on board. If it is not a lawful order, that is not an order that has to be followed. And I'm very clear. We know what we need to be able to address the issue of public safety in our community. And there's no priority that I've had that has been higher than making sure that people can feel safe in their own neighborhoods and in their own communities. And I'm eager to be able to both invite the president and work with the president on this issue if he wants to be serious. But the problem is I'm seeing a lack of seriousness from the President of the United States to be able to address this issue.
I would also include elected officials in the House and in the Senate who are on the Republican side who seem to fawn over every little thing that he does, for crying out loud, and they're not doing anything to hold him accountable. Has it escaped you, or do you even entertain the thoughts that may enter most of our minds when you consider the fact that all of these cities he's talking about, Los Angeles, Chicago, now obviously Baltimore and others, you have governors who are on a Democratic side, and you have mayors who happen to be black. Has that factored into your thinking at all as to why Trump has taken these positions?
The thing that factors into me on his thinking is these are also places that he hasn't been. It's easy to go back to these old tropes about places being hellholes, about places being unsalvageable. It's almost like this. It's like this Archie Bunker kind of, political philosophy. And here's the thing. I don't come from the world of politics. My background is I'm a soldier. That's my training. That's how I was brought up. That's how I was forged, as a soldier. And the reason that I invited the president to come walk the streets with me, the reason I invited the president to come spend some time with the mayor and with the state's attorney and with the local law enforcement that we have in the area and with our community violence intervention groups is because I genuinely want him to come and learn. The way you address ignorance is education, and the president should come be educated as to what's actually happening on the ground instead of making these tropes from the Oval Office, these 1980s tropes. That in no way are reflecting the work and the sincerity of the work of what's happening on the ground and the people who are committing their lives to actually making the work happen.
You see the position that Gavin Newsom has taken against him, trolling him, being very Trump-like in terms of social media posts and things like that he put out there. I'm certainly not accusing you of that, but we both know while you served in our military, honorably, I might add, the president deferred. He did not do that. And I think it was because of bone spurs, if I remember correctly. I didn't remember that until you mentioned it, Governor. You mentioned it. You didn't call him President Bone Spur, but you might as well have, because you certainly alluded to that. That seemed to be, very unlike you, but some would say it's not like Newsom to be the way that he is. There seems to be a new strategy being employed by Democratic leaders. What do you say to that?
Well, I would just say it is fascinating. I mean, the president seems to have this very interesting obsession where he's spending time talking about how when we first met and making up conversations that happened when we first met. Even
He
though
said you called him the greatest president ever. That's what he said you called him. The greatest president of his lifetime. He said you told him that.
Yeah, I know I'm not breaking news here, but the president's not telling the truth.
Okay.
I can tell you when I first met the president came up and the very first thing out of his mouth was telling me I'm a really good looking guy. He said you're really good looking in person too, and then he proceeded to say my people tell me that you're doing a good job. How can I be helpful? And I started talking about the Key Bridge. And the work that was happening on the Key Bridge and how important it was for us to actually finish the mission and finish the job. While Maryland put on a case study on how to respond in these moments of crisis, the job is not done until I will look up and see the Francis Scott Key Bridge once again, watching over Baltimore. And that's when he told me that we'll help you, we'll help out. And so that was the conversation that I had with the president of the United States. So the thing about it for me, though, is our focus, and my focus will always be, I'm always going to ride for my people. Mm-hmm. I'm always going to defend Marylanders. I'm always going to make sure that they are okay. And especially when I'm watching them being used as our people being used as these laugh tracks. Mm-hmm. When the president of the United States is making ignorant comments from the Oval Office, and you have these, the laughing hyenas around him laughing about it, as if these are not people who are living in these communities. And the thing I want to remind the president of the United States is every time you talk about Baltimore, every time you talk about Marylanders, do you know who you're talking about? Americans. They're your people too, Mr. President.
Right.
And it would be wonderful if the president of the United States would understand that and take that seriously. That when you are making these snide comments about people, you are talking about Americans.
But what if he doesn't? What if he doesn't change his stripes? What if he continues to degrade, insult, or whatever, or mimic, or whatever the case may be? What if he engages in the kind of actions that says, Wes Moore came at me. So you know how he is, he'll double down. And as a result, you know what, any federal assistance that you may need, all of a sudden, that may be in jeopardy of being compromised because he didn't like the way you spoke to him. I mean, we can't rule out anything like that when it comes to him. We've seen how he is willing to go at people he perceives as being his enemies. What do you do then, Governor?
Well, here's what I know. Is that over these past months, the president of the United States has eliminated and said that Western Maryland is not going to get any FEMA support, that the president of the United States has fired over 12,000 Marylanders who are federal workers, that the president of the United States has now signed bills that's going to cut health care for around 250,000 Marylanders, that the president of the United States has now said during a press conference without talking to anybody else and knowing that it's not even legal to say that the FBI building is now not coming to the state of Maryland, that the president of the United States has now cut about $250 million of funding for rural health care in Maryland, that this assault on Maryland has already begun. But I want people to understand this is that so these people who are saying you should just kowtow or be quiet, people need to understand I'm not a simp. I'm a soldier, and I'm not just going to kowtow. That we are going to stand up for our people, and if you are deliberately coming after our folks, we know that in this moment, my job is to make sure that our people are going to be okay, and the people of Maryland are going to be okay. But our leadership has to stand firm, and the answer is never going to be bow down. I will work with anyone, but I will bow down to no one.
Governor, before I let you get on out of here, because I know you only have a couple of minutes, and I so appreciate the time that you've given me thus far. With that being said, I mean, that calls on you to fight, and obviously you're not going to hesitate to do so. Some would argue, looking at the state of the Democratic Party, sir, fighting for you might require you to step up even more and be willing to put your face on Front Street to go directly up against this man as the presidential nominee for the Democratic Party in 2028. This is stuff that we can't can't rule out. I'm unapologetic. I mention you all the time. I'm not apologizing for it. Don't be mad at me, damn it. I mention you all the time, and I'm not going to stop because we obviously know you're qualified. The question is, has this enticed you, dare I say, a bit more to do what you've told me before you're not even thinking about and you won't even consider because you're so committed to the state of Maryland, you ain't thinking about anything else? Has this kind of brouhaha with the president made you rethink that a little bit and say, wait a minute, I might decide to run against him?
I'm telling you, Stephen A., I have never been more locked in. I am fully focused on making sure that our people are going to be okay in this moment, because this is a very scary time for a lot of Marylanders, where we are watching how balance sheets are changing overnight. We're watching how the prices of everything are rising because of these random tariff policies and this trade war that the president has brought us into. We are seeing how these policies are making energy prices rise, that people are going back to school and they see how much more they're paying now for all that kind of stuff. So I am locked in on making sure that I'm in my state.
But talking to corporate America, they to a point about a couple of weeks ago, the S&P 500 was up about 10% and the economy is not doing bad and stuff like that. They say everything that he's doing is not necessarily bad. You, on the other hand, you're saying what you're saying, and I'm looking at it and I'm saying in order to take care of Maryland, you might have to position yourself to compete for the country. I mean, based on what you're saying. All I'm asking you is, are you thinking about it? That's all I'm asking.
I'm not thinking about it. I am not running. But what I do know is this, is that working families in Maryland and middle-class Marylanders know they have a fighter as their governor. And I'm fighting for people who don't know what the S&P is.
Right.
I'm fighting for people who aren't looking at the NASDAQ.
Right.
I'm fighting for people who aren't looking at the 10-year yield. I'm fighting for people who are just simply going to the grocery store and noticing, why is everything more expensive? I'm fighting for people who are trying to figure out their own retirement, or trying to now figure out, what am I going to do if my health care is cut off? Those are the folks I'm fighting for. And that's why, like in Maryland, we've given a tax cut to the middle class in Maryland and asking those who are doing very well to pay a little bit more. That's why in Maryland, we've done things like raising a minimum wage in the state of Maryland. And yes, asking those who have done very well and saying, we want you to invest a little bit more so we can have the world's best public school system, and I'm not having to lay off police officers and firefighters. So that's our focus in Maryland.
Governor Wes Moore, I'm unapologetically a fan of yours. You know that. I'd say that I apologize for that to no one. I don't give a damn how they feel. That's how I feel about you, okay? And we'll talk about this more in the future before I let you get on out of here, because I know your team said you got to go. You got a busy thing. You got a busy day ahead of you. I'm not letting you get out of here without transitioning to sports for a second and bringing up the Baltimore Ravens. Now, I'm going to shock you on this. Governor. I got the Baltimore, and you know I'm a Steelers fan. You know that, okay? You had me at the game with you, and you trolled me for a week after they kicked out. You know what? Don't remind me. Don't even start. Stop it. Just stop it. Oh, I'm still hurt. But I will say this to you. Right now, I will tell you this. There is no excuse. I got the Baltimore Ravens winning it all. There's no excuse. You got everything. There is no reason why the Baltimore Ravens should not win the Super Bowl championship. The floor is yours, sir. What is the Baltimore Ravens going to do this season? I want to hear from your mouth.
So I want to be clear.
Oh, man. You're trolling me. You're trolling me.
Week 1 is going to be a big week, because if we go into Buffalo and beat Buffalo, I think people are going to see from Jump Street just how good this team can be. Because here's the thing. Our offense is literally a video game. There is not a single weakness on this offense. The offensive line is strong. You have Lamar. You have all-world Lamar Jackson as your quarterback.
Yes.
You have Derrick Henry in your backfield.
Yes.
You have DeAndre Hopkins as your wide receivers.
Preach.
You have Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely as your tight ends.
No, you want to bring in Mark Andrews. Ridiculous. I don't know about the Mark Andrews, bro. I don't know about that right now, but go ahead. I'm just saying. I remember.
He's coming back fully focused.
That might be such a bad memory for him. He might not need to play the Buffalo game. I mean, damn, man. I mean, Governor, if we being honest about it, he might not need to play that game. I'm just saying. All right? And by the way, you can't get away with putting so much emphasis on week 1, because what if they lose week 1?
It's true. But I'm saying I think this is a chance for us to show everybody that this is a team that was not only great last year, but actually is coming back even stronger. This defense, adding Jair like Alexander, watching this defense move in the preseason, Kyle Hamilton is seriously about to take the throne as one of the best defensive players in the entire NFL. So this defense is stacked. You have this kid Luke, and I know a lot of people worried about, Justin Tucker and whatever like that.
Right.
This kid Luke, have you watched him during the preseason?
Yes, I have.
61 yarders with room to spare. And our head coach is still a Super Bowl winning coach. So the point is this, there is not a weakness on this team. We got to stay healthy. We got to stay focused. We got to stay hungry, and we got to stay humble. But if we do those things, I really am wondering what team thinks, at least on paper, can hold a candle to my Baltimore Ravens this year. And I don't know who that is.
See, I don't know if I want you to be right because, Lord, you'll be hard to deal with. I mean, you're just going to troll everybody. But then again, it might up the ante a little bit more because you'll go from trolling, anti-Ravens fans to trolling the president. It might even sharpen your skills on that front. I mean, who knows?
Let me tell you something. If the Ravens run the table, I'm going to be unbearable. Absolutely unbearable. If you do not want to hear all Ravens, stop following me.
Governor Wes Moore of the great state of Maryland, I appreciate your time so much, man. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me. I really appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
God bless you, Stephen A. Thanks for everything, man.
No problem. Thanks again to the Governor of Maryland, Mr. Wes Moore. You heard what he had to say. Didn't mince words. He's a soldier. He's not fading. He's no simp. These are his words, not mine. It's a lot of things that's going to get very, very interesting. I think that's the man for the Democratic Party. That's my personal opinion. That's the man right there. That's him. If you the Dems, I hope you're listening. That includes Gavin Newsom. Just saying. Just saying. Coming up, he is a 3-time Super Bowl champion, one of the greatest tight ends in the history of football. But his greatest achievement in the eyes of millions is yet to come. I'm talking about Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift. Stay tuned. Got something to tell y'all. Y'all probably know already, but it doesn't mean you ain't gonna want to hear it again. That's up next right here on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Back with more in a minute. Welcome back to the Stephen A. Smith Show. It's official. Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce are engaged to be married. The 14-time Grammy Award-winning pop superstar and a 3-time Super Bowl championship took to social media to reveal the news this past Tuesday. Quote, "Your English teacher and your gym teacher are getting married." The duo captioned a series of photos in a joint Instagram post, which garnered 1.2 million likes in its first 10 minutes. What do you say? What do you say? Listen, I want to say something right now. Okay. I've known Travis Kelce for years. He's a good brother. I got a lot of love for him. He's a great champion. I know he's on a mission because of how they got beat down in the Super Bowl by the Philadelphia Eagles last year. But in the end, what it comes down to is that he's been around for a long time, been playing great football for a long time, been single, been living his life for a long time. And so, you make this kind of leap, kind of commitment, nothing but the best to you and your future. No doubt about this. We just need to understand in the Taylor Swift, we're talking about a different beast here. And I say that affectionately and totally complimentary. I'm just looking at some stats here. It says here, Taylor Swift, this is my research, y'all. She's made the NFL over $1 billion in brand recognition alone since she started dating Travis Kelce. The NFL has increased by $1 billion in brand recognition. They said that her Eras Tour, she reportedly boosted local economies by hundreds of millions of dollars, particularly in places like Los Angeles and Vancouver. One market researcher said the Eras Tour had a $5 billion global impact. Travis Kelce's Instagram page alone jumped from 2.7 million to almost 6.9 million since getting into a relationship with Taylor Swift. The Chiefs some fan growth metrics pronounced. Chiefs marketing executive told InStyle that women now make up 57% of the team's total audience, which is a much higher figure than the 46% league average. This is what we're talking about with the Taylor Swift effect. She's the real deal. Viewership among teen girls ages 12 to 17 spiked 53% from the season-to-date average of the first 3 weeks of Sunday Night Football, while the audience among women aged 18 to 24 was up 24%, and women 35 plus increased 34%. NBC said this about the Chiefs' 2023 New York Jets matchup, Chiefs versus the New York Jets primetime game, at which Taylor Swift was featured several times. Quote, the collective growth resulted in an approximate viewership increase of more than 2 million female viewers. That's the Taylor Swift effect. According to a report in Variety, Taylor Swift's Eras Tour officially ended as the first ever $2 billion tour. The nearly 2-year, 149-date run grossed $2,077,618,725 and was attended by over 10 million people worldwide. The official numbers were confirmed to Variety by Swift's representatives. The first 20 stops of the tour, comprising 53 shows, took place at NFL stadiums. There's different levels to winning. There's very few levels to winning more than Travis Kelce just won. But she ain't losing either, because he's a good brother, handsome brother, champion, successful, the whole bit. All you could do is tip your cap to them. That's you, number one, wishing them all the happiness in the world. And number two, hoping a little bit of that happiness could be sprinkled to us all. That's all we can say. That's all we can say. That's it for this edition of the Stephen A. Smith Show. Once again, I want to say thank you to Governor Wes Moore of Maryland for coming on the show and blessing us with his time and his presence. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, speak to y'all later. Peace and love.